very energetic,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Clouds are always changing, right?
Mm-hmm.
When I'm looking out
Yes.
my window, I don't see the same clouds that I saw 2 hours ago. So that's
Mm-hmm.
exciting to me that, oh, something is changing. What's happening, right? And I said that I love asking questions. So when I'm looking out, I'm like, oh, something's happening. Be-
Okay. Hello, Sobat Kokamuhi. Welcome back to our podcast series where we talk about how to engage the community for a better earth. I'm Nikita, your host who will guide you in this conversation. And today episode is so special for me because we will talk about crucial and relatable things. And nowadays, so we face global warming, climate crisis, air pollution, and the other thing that impact on human well-being. And we start noticing some changes happen in our environment, right? So today we will talk how to notice changes around us with the community. And in today's episode, we have special guest. Her name is Miss Marile. Hello, Miss Marile.
Hello, Nikita. I'm excited to
and
be
she,
here.
yeah, thank you so much. And she is a project scientist for NASA Globe Clouds and an education outreach coordinator at NASA Langley Research Center. So I'm so happy to talk with you and thank you for being here, Miss Marile.
Yes, thank you. I'm excited and to be on this podcast.
Yeah, and how do you feel today?
Today is great. It's very sunny here. So I'm in
Mm-hmm,
the state of Virginia in the United
mm-hmm,
States. And
mm-hmm,
it's a very sunny day, not very many clouds, a few
mm-hmm,
cirrus clouds here and there, and some
mm-hmm.
contrails that I noticed as I walked
Yeah.
this morning and I walked my dog this morning.
Yeah. So we, in the beginning, Miss Marile starts to notice what happened in her environment. She
Yes.
talked about weather and also clouds. That's
It's
interesting.
my favorite topic are clouds.
Yes,
So,
yes, yes, yes. Of course. And the interesting about you is you are from Puerto Rico, right? Which is
yes.
I saw that there is interesting destination for tourists to go. I saw great and wonderful beautiful beach there, and also I saw colorful buildings there. And can you tell us about your childhood, your cultural background, and what is the interesting thing about your culture?
Yes. So, yes,
Mm-hmm.
I was lucky enough to be born and raised in San Juan, Puerto Rico. San Juan is the capital, which has the beautiful buildings. It has lots of beaches. Um, but that's where my family has been forever and ever and ever. So it was quite exciting.
Mm-hmm.
It helped me become a scientist because I would go and fly kites right there at the fortress. So there's a very old Spanish fortress or a fortress made by the Spaniards in the 1500s. And it was a great place to fly kites. So I love flying kites. Still today, I don't do it
Oh,
very
flying
often,
kites.
but I love to fly kites, and that's something that we would do on the weekends. But the beach is right there.
Mm-hmm.
There's many different areas where I would go to look at the animals. So something that I love to do with clouds or with the insects. When I walk at
Mm-hmm.
night, I like to shine a light to look for spiders in the
Mm-hmm.
grass. I don't know if you like to do that, but there's the tiny spiders glow, which is, I think, is really interesting. I love to make observations. And when I was
Mm-hmm.
young, I did not realize that I was being a scientist, but now looking back, um, I realized that it's a scientist. So I would go to the beach and I would notice the fish. I would notice different
Mhm.
sharks, like little baby, not this type of baby shark, not the dance, but actual baby sharks. And I
Mhm.
would just fall in love. So I did a lot of snorkeling. Um,
Mhm.
but I also lived in a city. Uh, it's a big city, so it was pretty hot. Sometimes it wasn't safe, so I had to stay inside a lot. But what that allowed me was to read about animals. So I remember in Puerto Rico, it's the tropics. Everything is in Spanish. So what I like to say is that there was only one class
Mhm.
that was in English out of all my classes. So my math class was in Spanish. My science class was in Spanish. But which class was not in Spanish? Which one do you
Mhm.
think, Nikita? What was the one class that when I went to school that was not in Spanish?
Mhm. And do you think language is something interesting and important for you? Because I saw that you explained about clouds in Hispanic language, right? And you also
Mm-hmm.
speak on English, but you also bring your cultural identity by your language. Do you think that bring culture, bring our identity on culture in education is important for you?
Yes, it's extremely important. So the answer is yes, I only had one class in English, which was English class.
Mm-hmm.
In that the way that I learned or the
Mm-hmm.
shows that I watch
Mm-hmm.
come from the culture. So
Mm-hmm.
even the concerts that I would go to or the singers are not the singers that here in the US they follow. But it's important because it's part of you to bring out your
Mm-hmm.
culture um,
Mm-hmm.
and relate it because that's what makes you you. So I love to bring my culture and talk about the food, especially. So when people sometimes think of Puerto Rico, they think of rice and beans and great
Mm-hmm.
food. And yes, I still eat a lot of rice and beans um,
Mm-hmm.
because it's what I grew up with. So we
Mm-hmm.
are Puerto Ricans. We are tend to be very energetic, which I am very
Mm-hmm.
energetic. I'm trying to control it, but I'm very energetic, very loud,
Mm-hmm.
friendly, and um, we dance to any type of music. It could be a commercial and we're dancing. So dancing
Mm-hmm.
is also in our culture.
Yeah, yeah, that's wonderful thing that because culture also makes what's you, so it is important to bring our culture, and you also love about music and also food, right? And if you have the opportunity to pick one of your favorite thing in your in your culture, do you pick food or music or what? What else?
Oh my
What is
gosh,
your favorite,
that's a really hard
the
question,
most
Nikita.
favorite thing or language?
Uh,
But that's
just
the
one
fun
thing.
thing.
Um, I guess I'll pick food. I love food.
Mhm.
I'll
Okay,
find
okay.
another type of music, but I love food.
So what is your favorite food
Oh
in
goodness.
Spain?
Whew, if you see videos of me, you'll notice that I don't have a one, I have like
Mhm.
two at least. So
Mhm.
when I come and visit the island still,
Mhm.
what I love to eat is
Mhm.
um, biste, which is a very thin like steak with onions, rice and beans, maybe
Mhm.
some avocado, which we call it aguacate, and then probably flan or something with coconut is very traditional
Mhm.
for us.
Mhm.
But I also love sandwiches. Now, the sandwiches in Puerto Rico are very different because they come from the Spanish
Mhm.
heritage. So Spain
Mm-hmm.
was there for 500 years.
Mm-hmm.
So they're made very differently than what you might think. So there's a sandwich called tripleta, which means triple, because it has
Mm-hmm.
three different types of meat and it's very yummy. So those are my two favorite things from the culture.
Yeah. Because today we talk about observation, and I observed that you love very nature food. So you say that you love sandwich. Sandwich come from vegetable, and you also love the food from coconut and avocado, right?
Mhm.
Yeah,
Mhm.
and that's interesting thing. And you have been a scientist for years, educating people to care for the environment, and you also got some awards for your hard work and dedication. So I'm wondering about the process until you become a scientist. So can you share with us your journey to becoming a scientist?
Oh, yes. So, my journey of becoming a scientist. So the first thing it, that I needed to figure out is that I actually wanted to be a scientist or that I wanted to study some sort of science,
Mm-hmm.
um, because I was also doing music. And so when I
Mm-hmm.
was in school, I was also in the Conservatory of Music. And so I would
Mm-hmm.
play harp, I played flute, I would play a little bit of guitar. I traveled a lot with my music groups,
Wow. Mm-hmm.
which was a lot of fun. I was also really good at um, like interpreting poems and books, what you would call
Wow.
humanities. So if you would think I had like different options, but I always leaned into the math and science and wanted to like more know more about those details than the other
Mhm.
things. Um, and then I had this idea that because I was a girl, it would be hard or I wouldn't be accepted. And I don't know where I got that idea, but little by little, I noticed that it was more me perceiving what might happen instead of what was happening. And so
Mhm.
I had many teachers when I got to high school that were
Mhm.
supportive.
Mhm.
And so sometimes we have these ideas in our heads that limit us, or we think that we're limited by either our background, our language, who we are. And sometimes that's not true. And maybe one thing happened, but in general, we tend to miss the positives and only focus on the negative events. And so
Mhm.
it took me a little bit to find the science that I wanted to do. I
Mhm.
love animals. I have a dog and I have a cat and I have fish, and I really thought I wanted to be an animal doctor. This is a really hard word in English for me to say, so I'm going to try.
Mhm.
Veterinarian,
Oh, well,
veterinarian.
that's
So still
very
today,
difficult.
there's words that I cannot say very well. I have to say them
Mhm.
slowly. Um,
Mhm.
but when I started taking the classes in college, so when I went to
Mhm.
the university, I noticed that I liked more chemistry than biology. And so then I switched to chemistry. And I really liked um, working in a laboratory. What I liked about being in a laboratory was actually working with the instruments. So
Mhm.
then, little by little, I realized that I wanted to be a scientist that works with instruments, making observations. Um,
Mhm.
and then again, other male professors noticed, and then they gave me opportunities to work in a laboratory, even though I was still in undergrad. And that was my
Mhm.
favorite part. So, what I did was then um, make measurements of the air at
Mhm.
the beach and then
Mhm.
in the city where the university was. And that meant that I had to clean um, the filters. We were using filters, so you have to get
Mhm.
them ready or clean them. You have to
Mhm.
go to your site, which was always fun.
Mhm.
There were a
Mhm.
lot of, we call them cobitos. In English, you
Mhm.
call them hermit crabs. There were a lot of
Mhm.
cobitos or hermit crabs where I was.
Mhm.
So I loved that, and I kept looking at them, but I had to remember I had to put my instrument out, put the instrument, make sure that everything's running. But we're at the beach, so you have to be creative too. So there's a lot of creativity when you're a scientist on if something
Mhm.
doesn't work, how you're going to fix it quick to get the instrument running and look at what you find and then ask questions. And so I love to
Mhm.
ask questions. I love the creativity and then using my hands with the instruments.
Mhm.
So even though I did not know from the beginning that I wanted to be a scientist, I kind of
Mhm.
saw where my interests were and what I did not like,
Mhm.
and then asked questions for people. And then little by little, they helped me become a scientist like what I am
Mhm.
today.
Oh, yeah. Yay. Yeah. So that's the testament how your passion bring you into a scientist and how your curiosity helps you becoming a scientist and you have a supportive people that also help you becoming a scientist, right?
hmm I
And do
also
you
had to be okay with saying no.
Mhm.
So I really, really, really wanted to be, I'm going to try it again, a veterinarian because I love the animals. I love helping
Mhm.
dogs and cats.
Mhm.
So I had to be okay saying that is not for me and then
Mhm.
take a different path. Sometimes that's really hard for us
Mhm.
in that it's hard. We can get stuck and then we don't move. So if
Mhm.
you're willing to take a chance and take a different path slightly, you might find some great things down in that path.
Mhm. Yeah. And the thing is, we need to stay in positive mind, right? That's one
Yes,
of the key. And when you follow the thing and try to figure out how to work with this thing and stay curious, you will feel enjoy with your work, right?
that's right. That's right.
And you are a project scientist for NASA Clouds, right? And can
hmm
you explain to us what globe is?
Oh, yes. So GLOBE is an acronym. So each letter means a
Mhm.
word. And so it's the
Mhm.
global learning and observations to benefit the environment. GLOBE. It's a program that's almost, almost 30 years. So next year,
Whoa.
we're going to celebrate 30 years.
Mhm.
Um, and it started when teachers and scientists got together on how students, just like you, can make observations of what's around them in a way that scientists can then use, or they themselves can use, and help scientists understand better the environment. Um, and so it's worldwide as well.
Mhm.
It is sponsored by NASA, but is
Mhm.
supported by NOAA, NSF,
Mhm.
which is the National Science Foundation, and then the US Department of State. Right now, we have 127 different countries that are part of
Wow.
GLOBE, which is very
That's a lot.
exciting. It is
Yeah.
a lot. Um, we learn about each other's cultures, about, but also about each other's environments.
Mhm.
And the most important thing is to make sure that we're making the observations the same
Mhm.
way so that they can be
Mhm.
compared in what we call that our protocols or steps. So students around the world are making research or studies and making
Mhm.
observations right now about air, the water, the plants, and the animals. So it's a very exciting
Mhm.
program to be a part of.
Yeah, that's very exciting to hear that it's more than 100 country, right? And you mentioned that a globe come from global learning, observation to benefit environment, right?
hmm
And
Yes.
from your perspective, how do you define or describe environment? And why do we have to notice the change in our environment from our observation?
So to me, the environment is what's around you, and it could be really close or it could be your whole city. Um, and it's to me, because I love clouds, it also includes the air, it includes the clouds, it includes any type of plants. So some
Mhm,
areas have trees, some areas do not have trees, some areas
mhm,
have grass, some areas
mhm,
don't have grass. Um,
mhm,
and then the water. What type of water is it around you? Is it salty water? Is it fresh water? Is it brackish, which is a mixture? How many rivers do you have? Do you have occasions when there's fires or where there's volcano erupting?
mhm,
All those things is the environment. And scientists study the environment in many different ways. And if you
mhm,
think about it in different levels, like zooming in to take samples of the soil, or zooming all the way out and using satellites to study it. Each different view of like taking a sample in one spot to using, let's say, drones or an aircraft to fly in a certain area, take photos to a satellite. They're all important because they all give us different information.
mhm,
And so having the students and the public make observations of their surrounding is helping contribute to this data set from different levels, from micro to macro. And so it's
mhm,
really
okay.
important, and especially to note changes. You are the expert of your environment, of your location, especially if you've been there for a long time. You know, you can tell what is something that's, let's say, normal or that, oh, it happens quite often versus something that, this is different. What's happening right now, right?
Mhm, yes.
You are more of an expert than I am because you know your environment, you know your location. So
Mhm,
having you make those observations and know also when to make more because something different is happening is really exciting for the program.
mhm. Yeah, that's interesting to hear that we do the observation from micro to macro, and we can be an expert for our environment that teach us that each of us is really important for our environment, right?
That's right.
So everyone can be the contributor, everyone can be a superhero by gathering data, and then the scientists can also help us to how we can convert the data into information and try to communicate what's the data that we get, right?
Yes, yes. Think of it as a partnership or a collaboration. When we work
Mhm,
together, we get
mhm.
much better results, right?
Yes.
Uh, than when we try to work alone. Hmm.
Yeah, collaboration is an important thing in this earth because what we face is global problem. We face global warming that is an origin and a global thing. So we need to work together. We cannot work alone, and collaboration is the key. And I'm really interested that you say you really love cloud. And can you tell us why you love cloud so much? Or we have sun, we have star. Then why you pick cloud as your favorite thing?
Ooh, okay, that's a hard one. I mean, look at them, right? Like they're all
Yeah.
around us. Why do I love clouds so much?
Mm-hmm.
Let's go back to my culture. I am
Okay.
very active, very energetic,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Clouds are always changing, right?
Mm-hmm.
When I'm looking out
Yes.
my window, I don't see the same clouds that I saw 2 hours ago.
Mm,
So that's
mm.
exciting to me that, oh, something is changing. What's happening, right? And I said that I love asking questions. So when I'm looking out, I'm like, oh, something's happening because the clouds are no longer there. There's actually clear sky. So what does that mean for the weather or what's going to happen later today? Is it going to rain? Is it going to just be dry? So I think that's why I like clouds so much is
Mhm.
they're always changing, they're always having me ask questions, and then they're just beautiful.
Mhm.
Those that produce shadows, right? Cast a
Mhm.
shadow when it's nice and warm, when it's hot and you need a
Mhm.
break and this nice cloud passes and you feel the breeze. So it interacts with your body too, with your emotions. You're
Mhm.
like, oh, that was a nice break. Okay, let me keep running or keep flying my kite. Um, Also, you can see beautiful colors in them. So
Yeah,
if
that's
right?
true.
I love
Mhm.
that. When you have cirrus clouds, which are very
Mhm.
thin and made of ice, and if they're right by the sun at a certain angle, it has to be at a certain angle, and those ice crystals have to be at the same shape. You can see what we call sundogs, which is kind of like a
Mhm.
rainbow but inside the cloud. So that's why it
Mhm.
has a slightly different name for it, but you
Mhm.
see those beautiful colors in them. If you're walking
Yeah,
at night and it's full moon, you'll see um, like a crown around or a circle around the moon. So it's just beautiful. They're just beautiful. I think that's why I like
yeah,
them so
yeah,
much.
that's true. I agree with you. Cloud always change and cloud communicate to us a lot and it
Mm-hmm.
makes us curious of what is happening to the
Mm-hmm.
sky. And that's true that cloud has a beautiful color thing. The interesting thing that I experienced is my brain always wake me up around 5:30 a.m. Yeah, around that time. And because the weather in my place is really hot, so we open the door in our balcony. So when I open my eyes, I can directly see the sky. And in that time, in around 5:30 a.m., I see that the clouds and the sky color is so beautiful. Sometimes the color is like pink, the
Mm-hmm.
combination of pink and purple, sometimes the combination of orange and blue. Yeah, so beautiful.
Yes, yes. And that's physics in action, right? So
Hmm.
I'm an atmospheric scientist, which means that I study the weather and the climate, but it's
Mhm.
physics. It's really physics applied to the atmosphere. So the colors is that light from the sun
Mhm.
interacting with the aerosols, so the stuff that's in the air, or interacting with the ice crystals, with the cloud droplets, if it's or
Mhm.
rain, right? If you're looking at a rainbow. I love that because it's like, ah, it's physics in action. It's not just in a laboratory. You're walking outside and you see it. So I love that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's very exciting thing. And when I wake up, I see the sky. And yeah, it makes me feel exciting for start the new day.
Yeah.
Excited to start a new day. Yeah, the sky is really beautiful. So yeah, that's why I feel grateful to start the day. And talk about the sky. In Indonesia, we experience peatland fires and smoke annually. So every year we experience that. I noticed that it also impact on the cloud because
Mhm.
we experience acid rain. So it chemical reaction, right?
Mhm.
Like you said before, the interaction between the chemical thing. Um,
Mm-hmm.
can you explain us more about what happened to clouds and sky during peatland fires and smoke?
Yes, I would love to. Okay, so in order to have a cloud, you
Mhm,
need aerosols. Aerosols are particles that are floating in the air. Most of them
mhm,
are really tiny that you can't
mhm,
see. Um,
mhm,
Aerosols can be natural, like pollen, and
mhm,
I have allergies, so I notice when there's a lot of pollen, like my nose gets
mhm.
stuffy. It could be
Okay.
sand, but it can also be from fires, so that
Mhm,
helps. And what happens is that once you have those things in the air, the water will condense or come
mhm,
around it, and then
mhm,
more and more water comes and it forms a droplet. Now, a
mhm,
cloud droplet are teeny, teeny, tiny. They're,
mhm,
aerosols are about how thick your hair is,
mhm,
and then a droplet is smaller. Once you have a water droplet, then you can
mhm,
see the cloud. That's when you see that
mhm,
white. Okay. Um, Now, as all that water comes, if it starts getting bigger and bigger, there might be other droplets or cloud droplets near it, and then they become bigger. When they become bigger, those aerosols start interacting with each other. And
mhm.
that's where you get that chemistry that's happening, which is so exciting. Um, because if you zoom in, right, micro to macro, one of the things I loved about chemistry and biology was you could zoom in into a microscope and look
Mhm,
at the structure. So if you look at the
mhm,
shape of
mhm,
soot, SOOT, which is what comes out of the fires, it
mhm,
kind of looks like una cadena. In Spanish, we call it a cadena. It's
mhm,
uh, like a lasso, maybe, or something. So it has a lot of spots for things to connect to it. And that's how you
mhm,
start getting the chemistry. For instance, dust or salt from the oceans,
mhm,
the salt, they're they look like cubes
mhm,
versus this thing that looks like a string. So
mhm,
as they unite, those are the spots where all this chemistry
mhm,
happens, and then um, you can end up with acid rain. You can end up with dirty snow sometimes if it's in the winter in other areas. So depending on
mhm,
what goes into the cloud, it'll have some chemistry. And when those
mhm,
cloud droplets grow big enough to become
mhm,
rain droplets, that's when they start
mhm,
falling, and then we
mhm,
see what's inside. A way that we
mhm,
study it is going into the clouds with airplanes, and
mhm,
there's some instruments that take photos of those drops, and
mhm,
other instruments collect
mhm,
um, what's inside of those drops. So that's how we
mhm,
can look at those structures later in a microscope.
mhm. Ah, okay, okay. So at the beginning, the aerosol will goes up and become a droplet, right? And it
Mm-hmm,
become bigger and bigger until become a structure, and it can be arranged. And
mm-hmm.
it has a instrument that collect the data, um, collect the data. And can you tell us what instrument it is and explain more about the instrument?
Yeah, so with satellites, we have some instruments that are more lasers. Um, so there's some instruments just receive information, and some instruments send out information and receive back. When you
Okay.
send out, that's called active. So it could
Mm-hmm.
be a laser, it could be a radar, and that helps us look inside of the cloud and look at
Mm-hmm.
where are the big water droplets and things like that. Others are passive, and so
Mm-hmm.
they're seeing how the sunlight, let's say, reflects off of that cloud.
Mm-hmm.
So that's passive and active. That gives us information of the drops of the clouds, the
Mm-hmm.
size of the clouds, what's inside
Oh.
of the clouds, all the way to the ground.
Mm-hmm.
In order to look at those particles, though, you have to use an airplane. So in the
Oh,
airplane,
airplane.
in the wings, you can put different instruments. Some
Mm.
instruments have a picture, like a camera on the top.
Mm-hmm.
It's like an opening camera on the
Mm-hmm.
top and
Mm-hmm.
a or a laser in the top and a camera in the bottom. So every time that the laser gets interrupted, it takes a picture. So that's how we
Mm.
take pictures of droplets. Or if we're flying into another type of smog or smoke, we can look at that. Something that I did when I was a student was put outside of it would be in a stick, and you would put a piece of glass outside of the um, airplane in the dry air before you would hit the clouds and bring it in, and then
Mm-hmm.
you would have all the particles or the
Okay.
aerosols that are in the air. And then you would put that under a microscope and
Mm-hmm.
then see all the different structures and identify what's in it. So those are a few ways on how
Mm-hmm.
people study clouds and the aerosols and how it interacts inside. You have to
Okay.
still do a bit of laboratory work or
Mm-hmm.
modeling work to get the full
Mm-hmm.
story.
Mm, okay, okay. So we use satellite to get the data. Their cameras. So that is we call macro observation, right? And
Hmm.
for
Hmm.
the observation that we do in the Microsoft, do we call it micro observation or?
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah.
Okay, okay.
And and something that's been found is depending
Mm-hmm.
on what you're burning and how
Mm-hmm.
you burn it, you can have different structures. And so a fire in
Mm-hmm.
Indonesia will
Mm-hmm.
look different than a fire, let's say in the Amazon, when you're looking at the structures. So when you're
Mm-hmm.
looking at the aerosols, you can notice those differences too, which is so interesting.
Yes, and talking about observation, so you are a project scientist in Globe, and what is the most interesting project with you do with your student or your with the educator in your
Oh,
place?
I love when they come up with their own investigations and then
Mm-hmm.
they talk to me for some advice and
Mm-hmm.
then they reach out back with their final results. That's like one of my
Mm-hmm.
favorites. And so there is a group in Louisiana in the United
Mm-hmm.
States that's looking at solar power and clouds for their area, seeing if solar energy is a
Mm-hmm.
good resource because
Mm-hmm.
they have power outages, which means that they don't have energy all the time. Sometimes they're without energy. So would
Mm-hmm.
solar panels be a good solution? And then there's another group in Alaska who compared clouds with fishing because fishing
Oh.
is very cultural for them,
Mm-hmm.
and it's a way of getting food. And so they
Mm-hmm.
found out that you can catch more fish if there's a lot of clouds, which is very exciting. And
Mm-hmm.
I go fishing sometimes, not very often, but I have noticed that when it's very sunny, it's really hard to catch a fish versus when it's cloudy or even
Mm-hmm.
stormy. It's much easier. So these things that you might not notice, once you start gathering the data and writing
Mm-hmm.
it down, then you can
Mm-hmm.
see that's very exciting. Um,
Mm-hmm.
Here in the United States or in North America, Mexico, United States, and Canada, we just had a total solar eclipse, which
Mhm,
was very exciting. In certain parts, it got very dark during the
mhm,
middle of the day. Um, And some people say, "Ooh, I feel like the wind is catching up," or "I feel like it's getting cold." And then
Mhm.
they would come and look at the data or a graph and say, "Oh, it is getting cold. Oh, it is."
Mhm.
So it's interesting also when you're noticing these changes that
Mhm.
it's not just you're sensing it with your body, but it's really
Mhm.
neat to look at the numbers and see
Mhm.
how cold did it get? How windy did
Mhm.
it get? How did the
Mhm.
clouds actually change? So you can
Mhm.
answer questions and then come up with more questions, right?
Mm, yeah, yeah. And why number is really important to give information to people, rather than just sensing from our skin.
Yeah, there's certain cultures that value more the numbers than the
Mm-hmm,
stories.
mm-hmm,
Um, or you can also study the numbers in many different ways.
mm-hmm,
Like I can graph it, I can put it into a computer model, I can
mm-hmm,
gather other data, other
mm-hmm,
numbers, and average
mm-hmm,
it and see for a
mm-hmm,
region. Versus a story is a one moment in time.
mm-hmm,
And I noticed also that when I was telling my story of the eclipse, there were
mm-hmm,
certain things that maybe were not super accurate. And so I did
mm-hmm,
notice the water. I was near water. The water stopped. There were no
mm-hmm,
waves.
mm-hmm,
The first time I said it, I said that it was during the eclipse. But if I remember back during totality, when it got
mm-hmm,
super dark, I wasn't looking at the water when it was super dark. I was looking up at the sky because I could not
mm-hmm,
see the sun anymore.
mm-hmm,
So there's certain details that you get better from data, and there's certain details that you get better from the stories. And so it's
mm-hmm,
important to get both. And so if you look at a laboratory book, right?
mm-hmm,
So
mm-hmm,
you have the numbers, but you also have notes and comments.
mm-hmm,
So it's
mm-hmm,
important to mix both of them, not just numbers, but
mm-hmm.
numbers and comments and stories. That's when it becomes richer.
Yeah, number makes us can make the graphic, and
Hmm.
it we from number we have ability to do modeling, and then also we got an accurate thing, right? Rather
Hmm.
than just sensing. And
Hmm.
yeah, that makes sense. When I say today is really hot, maybe people from different culture say 20 like 20 degrees Celsius uh is
It's actually
hot,
cold,
but
right?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But in my culture, in my place, 20 degree is quite cool, because I experience I experience the temperature in my place, sometimes more than 30 degrees Celsius. So yeah, when we say hot, it relative, so it not really accurate yet.
That's
And
right. That's right.
I'm still notice you shared about how clouds influence on fishing. When the sky is cloudy, it will easier for us to do get fish, right? And do you
Hmm.
know the reason of that, or
I
you are
don't
still
know.
fishing?
I
Okay.
don't know. So that those were the students that did that
Mhm,
research, and they found that out.
mhm,
So it would be interesting to now work with somebody that works with
mhm,
fish, right?
mhm,
And what are their behaviors? Or maybe
mhm,
you can go near a body of water that have fish and see when do you notice them? When do they come up? Is it when it's
mhm,
cloudy? Is it when it's clear? Is it at certain
mhm,
times of the day, right?
mhm.
Um, that would be interesting. It's more questions, right? So in science, we
Yeah.
start with a question and
Mhm.
we learn something and then we ask more questions, which is very exciting.
Yeah, that's exciting. Even though we don't know the answer right now, it makes us still curious and trying to find the answer, and
Hmm.
it develop our creativity. And I heard you mention about solar eclipse. And I think that is the interesting thing to talk. So Globe did the observation during solar eclipse, right?
Hmm.
And can you share with us what you observed and how was the observation of the solar eclipse?
Oh, okay. So we asked people to make air temperature and cloud observations before it
Mhm,
got dark and then after it got, and when it got dark, to take a pause and enjoy the beauty because it
mhm,
only lasted like 3 minutes. And then
mhm,
after. So there is an app called the Globe Observer app that you can
mhm,
download with permission,
mhm,
um, and make observations. So
mhm,
it read where I was and it told me when it was gonna get dark and then when to
mhm,
start my observations before it got dark and then after the darkness when it was light again. So
mhm,
where I was by the water. It got dark right at 2 p.m., so right after lunch. It's when it got
mhm,
super dark. It looked like it was nighttime almost.
mhm,
And so it started with a lot of clouds. It was nice and warm, probably like 28 degrees Celsius.
mhm,
Um, and then you have these special solar viewing glasses that protect your eyes so you can see the sun. And then the moon just got in the way. So instead of seeing a round sun, you saw a sun that was
mhm.
a bite was taken off of it, right? Kind of like
Wow.
Pac-Man or something.
Mhm,
And then as that happened, even though the amount of light seemed normal,
mhm,
the temperature starting to get cold and
mhm,
colder. And then all of a sudden, the moon was right above the sun, and then everything got dark. But
mhm,
around us, there was a little part right in the
mhm,
horizon that was
mhm.
orange.
Wow.
Yeah. And then it dropped. So if we started at 28, it probably got up to like 20 degrees Celsius, maybe, or 21. And then the moon kept moving away. So then the light came back up like it was
Mhm,
right after lunch again. And so
mhm,
the temperature got warm again, warm and warm, back to
mhm,
28 and a little bit more because it was in the afternoon. So in the afternoon, it always gets a little bit warmer than the rest of the day. Um, we noticed the birds. So the
mhm,
animals behave very differently. So we saw birds
mhm,
flying, but they were
mhm,
flying in circles. And one of the ideas that I heard is that birds like ducks
mhm,
fly towards the sunset, but
mhm,
since the sunset looked like it was all around us, that's
mhm.
why they flew in circles, which is very interesting to me.
Yeah.
So that was a little bit
Yeah.
of what I experienced during the eclipse.
Uh-huh. And even though you are now cloud scientist, you're still observing the animals
Mhm.
like birds, and you
Mhm.
so excited, right, to
Yes.
observe animals. And
Yes. It was
also,
very unique.
mhm, yeah. And I have a quite deep question. So, you have been a scientist for years, and what is the meaningful thing or the life-changing thing you experienced before and after becoming a scientist that observing a lot of nature, observing a lot of environment?
Mm, that's an interesting question. What is something so I come back to the people that I've met, not so much in the results, if that makes sense. So, one of the first things that I got to do, still as a student, but now as a graduate student, and so when you become a scientist, you need to keep studying a little bit more beyond your bachelor's degree. We went to Antigua and Barbuda in the Caribbean to study clouds. And
Mhm.
we had different airplanes, we had a boat, we had a satellite, and there were like 40 different scientists and 20 students. It was really exciting to be in this
Mhm.
island
Mhm.
nation and study. And being able to be in the airplanes, and we would see in one of the flights, I got to sit right behind the pilots.
Mhm.
So some of the airplanes were really big and had a lot of scientists in the back,
Mhm.
but I got to sit behind the pilots and I could see them going inside of the cloud and the water droplets running through the windows and outside of another cloud or fly right above the ocean and enjoying that with the students and the rest of the group. We would go out to dinner and talk about, oh, did you see that rainbow? Did you see that water spout, which is like a
Mhm.
tornado in the ocean? And look at what we found in the data. It's more of that excitement in the
Mhm.
moment of looking at the nature and
Mhm.
seeing how beautiful it is and all the data that we were getting. And
Mhm.
so it's more of the people
Mhm.
than of the actual data. So that experience was huge for me. And year after year, we would get together at
Mhm.
conferences
Mhm.
and then learn about what each one did. But we would
Mhm.
always remember those times when we were together. Um,
Yeah.
so I think that's really special too.
Uh, the special thing is when you with people and
Hmm.
have a conference and do the thing together, right?
Hmm. And I
So
think
what
that's
is
why I
it?
have the job that I have, right? Because I get to work
Yeah.
with students, with teachers, with scientists, and
Mm-hmm.
be together as a community.
Yeah, that's a wonderful thing to hear that, yeah, do the thing together, do the collaboration together is one of a memorable thing. Yeah, in this era, because of social media, sometimes we tend to be individual. But at the end of the day, when we work together, when we do the thing together, it becomes so memorable. And yeah, that's so interesting and exciting thing to do for who we are,
That's
right?
right. It's always better when we're together.
Yeah. And I think this close to the end, and I have one more question.
Mhm.
Can you share with us step by step tips on how we could notice the condition in our environment and how to communicate this condition to our community?
Mm, that's a really good question. Um, have a place where you're writing your notes. It could be a notebook, so
Mm-hmm.
like a laboratory notebook.
Mm-hmm.
And make sure that when even if you're making observations, you're not like you're seeing the differences, you're not necessarily um, having an instrument to collect a number. Um, make sure to write the date, the time, where were you standing, what did you notice, and then try to repeat that and go to that same spot. The most important thing is to go always to the same spot, the same location, to notice change, especially if it's based on our senses, eyes, um, skin, nose, taste, if there's like a plant that you want to taste, right, or a fruit. Um, always go to that same spot and sit there first for a moment
Mm-hmm.
and just let all your emotions gather that information. Sometimes we want to go quick, quick,
Mm-hmm.
quick, and we really need to sit back. And when we stand,
Mhm.
That's when we notice details versus
Mhm.
just big picture. Does that make sense? So
Yeah,
you
yeah,
might
yeah.
be walking and notice that, yeah, the sun is out, it's daytime, versus, oh, there's only one cloud out, or there's a cloud forming over here. If you stop and just look. So stop and then maybe sit or just notice little things and then repeat observations. Go to those spots multiple
Mhm.
times and then write down as much as you can because you never know when you'll need that one piece of information that you
Yeah.
knew, but when you go back, it's hard to remember what that was exactly.
Yeah, that's interesting that we need to sit and don't go quickly, just take
Hmm.
your time to gather your emotion. So I think that God created our body with a really great function, right? We have
Yeah.
eyes to see the thing, we have skin to sense how hot the weather, how cold the weather, and after we sense the thing, we have a great instrument that human create, like
Hmm.
temperature measurement or the other instrument like satellite.
Hmm.
So yeah, that's a great thing. And yeah, human is really great. And when they work together, it become really amazing.
Yeah,
Really amazing thing, right? Really
that's
wonderful
right.
thing. Yeah. And yeah, that's all my question. And I think that this podcast is really mind blowing for me because you shared a lot about cloud, about how we notice the thing, and about the instrument, airplane, and yeah, the other uh important value for us is we need to work together, and by working together, we can build the better earth, we can do the better thing, right?
That's right.
And you
Yeah,
also shared about culture. And yeah, for me, culture is our identity, and it also what makes us authentic and unique, right?
that's
Yeah.
right.
Do you have anything that you want to tell, or do you have any advice for young leaders or anyone that want to start noticing the change in their environment, or what is the important thing and noticing the change? Do you have any advice for our audience?
Yeah. Um, Something that I now value that maybe I did not value when I was younger
Mm-hmm.
is the importance of elders,
Mm-hmm.
relationship with elders. Because
Mm-hmm.
when you're young, you're trying to find who you are and where do you fit and what should you be
Mm-hmm.
doing. And
Mm-hmm.
that's very important, but
Mm-hmm.
nothing substitutes that relationship with an elder because they're
Yes.
looking out for you and
Mm-hmm.
they can guide you to the best path instead of trying different paths and failing. If you have elders, and they can be different ones, it
Mm-hmm.
can be a teacher, it can be a
Mm-hmm.
family member, it can be
Mm-hmm.
in your community, and they
Mm-hmm.
can guide you better. And especially when looking at observations, there
Mm-hmm.
might be a scientist that's working with the environment or looking at the animals or looking at the water already
Mm-hmm.
that can help you say, oh, yeah, thank you for noticing that. This is the history. They might have more information of the history of the area and how
Mm-hmm.
things have changed to help you focus on what should you be looking for or what details would be best. So
Mm-hmm.
always find multiple elders that
Yes,
can
I
guide you and
agree with
help you.
you. Mm-hmm. Yeah, the elder people always, I think in my experience, the elder people will always help you to guide where you want to go, and they will always support you with the information, with their knowledge, because yeah, they experience a lot. And thank you so much for sharing this great value.
You're welcome.
Yeah, that makes uh my brain and my body filled with positive energy.
Yes, yes. And know that if somebody asks you a question that might be
Mhm,
um, going against or digging into what you're saying,
mhm,
at the end, if you go through the process,
mhm,
it'll make you better, it'll make the
mhm,
data better. And so, as a
mhm,
scientist, we publish research, but we always have people looking into it and asking questions and saying, well, is this actually true? Did you consider this? This method might not be the best. Have you done this or that? Or, oh, this is really cool. Maybe you should add this data set. So know that it might feel a little bit
mhm.
intimidating and sometimes it might
Yeah.
hurt.
Mhm,
But at the end, if you're willing to sit, well, so what I do is I sit and say, okay, what can I learn from this? Then I I feel at the end that instead of getting offended, if I
mhm,
sit and ask the question, then I have more knowledge, more
mhm.
understanding, a brighter understanding than before
Yeah.
by answering those questions.
Yeah, yeah. When people asking us questions, sometimes it intimate us because we didn't figure out the answer, but at the end of the day,
That's right.
we become better and better. Yeah.
Yes.
This night is really great night because yeah, I got a lot of insightful thing, a lot of knowledge, and yeah, just my brain just filled with positive energy.
Good.
And thank you so much, Miss Marile, for sharing a lot of things. Hopefully, we can do the next podcast with different topics.
Yes.
And thank you so much for our audience who watch this podcast, and stay tuned with the next podcast because we will explore more how to engage with community with different thing and different insight. And before we close this podcast, we will we will say the powerful word as well, like we do before the last podcast. So, but in this episode is so special because we say Salam superhero, so we say superhero in Hispanic language. So we say it's superhéroe, right?
Superhéroe. Yes.
Yeah, yeah. So when I count 1, 2, 3 and say salam, we say superhéroe together. Are you
Perfect.
ready, Miss Marile?
Yes.
Okay. So I will count 1, 2, 3. Salam.
Salam superhéroe.
Superhéroe. Okay,
Yay.
thank you so much, guys. And see you next time. Bye bye. Sobat Kokawuhi. Thank you, thank you.